Hello to all students. In this video lecture, we are going to discuss structure and function of gallbladder. Gallbladder, which is also known as cholecyst. It is a sac-like structure present underside of the right lobe of the liver in a shallow depression. Now, if we look at the diagram, this is a sac-like structure which is known as gallbladder. Gallbladder is present underneath the right lobe of liver in a shallow depression. The size of the gallbladder is usually 7 to 10 centimeter in size and 4 centimeter in diameter. Bile produced from liver is a liquid, is a secretion which is stored inside the gallbladder, and it has a capacity of 50 ml of gallbladder, 50 ml of bile which is stored in the gallbladder. Gallbladder wall is composed of 3 layers which are made according to the proper functioning of the gallbladder, but we are not going to discuss those walls in details. The gallbladder is composed of 3 major parts. The first major part is known as fundus. The second is known as body, which is composed of a sac-like structure. And then there is a third part which is known as neck. Just between the body and the neck, there is a funnel-shaped structure which is known as infundibulum, and which open into a duct which is known as cystic duct. Right over here, there is a hepatic duct which is kept coming from the liver. Liver break down red blood cells and produce bilirubin and as well as water and some salts, and produce a secretion which is known as bile, which is then stored inside the gallbladder. Then this bile is secreted into the small intestine for the purpose of digestion, which help in the digestion. Bile is secreted from cystic duct into a main duct which is known as common bile duct, which opens into the first part of the small intestine which is known as duodenum. There is also a duct which is known as pancreatic duct, which comes from pancreas and produce pancreatic juice, which is poured into the small intestine right over here. So this portion is known as duodenum, which is the portion of first part of the small intestine. So bile is dropped into the small intestine for the purpose of digestion, especially of fats. So first of all, we are going to look at the main functions of gallbladder. The main function of gallbladder is to store bile, but because bile contain bile salts, and the function of bile salt are the functions of bile, and the functions of bile are the function of gallbladder. So we are going to discuss these functions one by one. First of all, storage of bile. Bile is a secretion which is produced by liver, contains different chemicals which we are going to discuss later on. So this is a site where bile is stored. Usually normal person produce 50 ml, 40 to 50 ml or sometimes 60 ml of bile. It helps in the concentration of bile. Some water present in the bile is absorbed by the walls of the gallbladder and makes it like little bit more viscous. So concentration of the bile increases in the gallbladder. Alteration of pH of bile. The usual pH of bile when it is released into the gallbladder is usually 8 to 8.6, which is more basic, which is then maintained from 7 to 7.6 inside the gallbladder to make it less basic. At the same time, it also secretes mucin, which act as a lubricant, which is make digestion and movement of the fat in the small intestine. It also maintains pressure of biliary system. If you look at this area is known as biliary system. So it maintains a pressure over here, which helps to move the bile from gallbladder into the small intestine. So this pressure is very necessary for the proper functioning of the gallbladder. Now we are going to look at the composition of bile. Bile is usually composed of water, which is 97.6%, while it also contains some solids which are 2.4%. In solids which are 2.4%, there are two types of chemicals, organic chemicals and inorganic chemicals. If we look at the composition of organic chemicals, it includes bile pigments, which the main bile pigment is bilirubin, which is end product of breakdown of red blood cells. It also contains bile salts, lecithin, which is a type of lipid, cholesterol, it is also a type of lipid, fatty acids, and mucin, which act as a lubricant. From inorganic material, it also contains sodium, calcium, potassium, chlorine, and bicarbonate ions. But most important of all these chemicals are bile salts. So we are going to discuss the main functions of bile salts, which are the function of bile and which are the function of gallbladder. So bile salts, what they do, they help in the emulsification of fat. Without bile salts, you cannot digest your fats. Whenever you eat oil, ghee, butter, animal fat, plant fat, it has to be digested with the help of lipid digesting enzyme lipases, but to digest them properly, fats needs to be emulsified, which is a detergent action done by the bile salts. So what is the emulsification? Emulsification is the breakdown of larger fat particles into smaller molecules. The smaller molecules of fats contain large surface area with the fat digesting enzyme, just as lipases, can act easily on smaller particles, and fats are easily can be digested. So emulsification is the process of breakdown of larger fat molecules into smaller ones, so that a fat digesting enzyme can act them and digest them easily. So it helps in the emulsification of fats. Later on, enzymes digest them. After the digestion of fat, absorption of fats is also done by the bile salts. Bile salts helps in the emulsification. Emulsification helps the digestion of fats. Then it is converted into smaller particles known as micelles, which are then absorbed by the small intestine in the villi. Bile salts also produce cholinergic action. With help of this action, biles can be released from the gallbladder. So bile salts helps in the secretion of bile from the gallbladder. Bile salts also produce cholagogue action. Cholagogue action is the contraction and relaxation of the walls of the gallbladder. So when bile salts are released into the small intestine, they send a message to gallbladder. Then gallbladder contracts, the wall of the gallbladder contracts, and bile is poured into the small intestine. So it is very important for the contraction of the gallbladder. Bile salts also have laxative function, because sometimes bile also contain mucin, and bile salts along with mucin helps prevent the constipation. Bile salts also reduce the risk of formation of gallstones. So bile salt prevent gallstone formation in the gallbladder. When bile is concentrated or bile salts are produced in very little amount, then what happens that the bile starts concentration and formation of crystals inside the gallbladder. These crystals join to form as particle, which then converted into stone, which can be of different sizes. Then these stones have to be removed from the gallbladder, or sometimes surgery is performed to remove the whole gallbladder if the gallstones is big or gallstones are so many and disturbing the function of the gallbladder. So more bile salts, less chances of getting gallstones. As I mentioned earlier, bile salts also help in the lubrication process, because bile contain mucin, which lubricate the small intestine. It also has antiseptic function. It means that they are able to kill some special type of bacteria in the small intestine. They also maintain the pH. As you know that the food coming from the stomach, which is also known as chyme, has acidic in nature because there is acid in the stomach. When this acidic food comes into the small intestine, bile salts helps to neutralize that acidic food into a basic pH, so that the enzymes present in the small intestine can act upon these food particles to digest them. It also helps in the excretory role because some materials from the liver can be excreted through bile salts like heavy metals, lead, mercury, copper, etc. Toxins, some special type of toxin can be removed from the gallbladder. Bile salts, cholesterol and lecithin can also be removed from liver into gallbladder, and then gallbladder into small intestine, and from small intestine through feces into the outside of the body. So in this way, today we had discussed about the anatomy and physiology of gallbladder. I hope it makes sense, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Until then, bye.